What's up, everybody? Welcome to Ray-Ban Can, and let's get right into it. We are doing a brake job on a 2021 Infiniti QX80, specifically the front brakes in this video, and the process is going to be pretty similar to other vehicles. So let's get started. This is pretty much all the product you're going to need: brake pads, brake rotors, caliper grease, caliper cleaner, some penetrating oil, shop rags, and some thread bolt Loctite, specifically the blue kind, not the red kind, not the maximum strength, just the medium strength. The reason you see two different brands, Bosch and Raybestos, is because one of them is for a set of rear brakes, which I'm going to do in another video. As far as the tools go, these are most of the tools I'm going to be using in this vehicle. I was going to say video. These are most of the tools I'm going to be using in this video. Only thing missing, I believe, is the actual jack itself and the air compressor. Also, do not forget your safety glasses and gloves. You're going to need those from time to time while doing this. You should have them at least. So first thing I do is pop the hood and take the cap off the brake fluid reservoir. The reason we do this is to relieve pressure when we're pushing the caliper pistons back. You can also just open the bleeders too. That's another way. I think I may show that way in another video. But this is just to basically to prevent overflow. Keep an eye on this so that it does not overflow. So every time you push a caliper piston back, take a look, make sure it's not getting ready to overflow. If it is, then take some of that brake fluid out of the reservoir. Next thing we're going to do is jack the vehicle up. At the actual jack point under the vehicle, check your owner's manual. Make sure you jack it up in a spot where you can actually put the jack at, because some folks, you can seriously damage your car if you put the jack in the wrong spot. And then also make sure you use jack stands. Now, if you're using any type of manual lug wrench like this one right here, make sure you loosen the lug nuts up before you jack up the car. In my case, it doesn't really matter. I'm using an impact wrench. They'll come off, the lugs will come off just fine. But if you don't have an impact wrench, you're doing this manually, loosen the lug nuts up before you jack the car up. Otherwise, you're gonna have some fun. So let's get these nuts off. Now that the lug nuts are off, let's go ahead and remove the tire. And don't be like this guy in the video. He should have his gloves on and safety glasses. Oh, that's me. While you have the tire off, now is a good time to just kind of take a look around at everything. Make sure that nothing looks out of place. If you look at that spring in the back, there is actually something wrong towards the bottom of it. Nothing big, but there's a little defect right there. Do anybody notice what that is? If so, put it in the comments below. Moving on. First thing we're going to do is remove these two bolts from the caliper cylinder body. We're going to turn the steering wheel to the right to make this easier. Little tip, make sure you're using the correct size sockets. You do not want to strip these bolts. That will make the job so much harder. There's one. And there's the other one. Now that the caliper body is loose, we don't want it hanging by the hose because you could do some serious damage. So if you have a caliper hanger like I have right here, just hang it somewhere where it's secure. If you don't have one of these, you could always use something like a coat hanger or a what are those things called? Those cords, bungee cords. You can always use a bungee cord, but whatever you do, don't have it hanging by the actual hose. Next thing to do is remove the old brake pad hardware. Next, we're going to take off these two bolts right here to remove the mounting brackets. They can be a little rough, so bear with yourself. I'm using an impact wrench. There's one. And there's the other. We're going to remove the mounting bracket and then remove the rotor itself. Now, before we install our new hardware, we want to take a look at this hub assembly right here. And if you have a wire brush, just try to clean it up a little bit by getting some of this rust off. I'm going to clean up the mounting bracket a little bit too as well. Be careful not to damage the pin boot. If you're leaving it on, I'm going to eventually take mine off. I'm going to clean up the caliper a little bit as well. Be careful not to damage the cylinder boot with this wire brush. Before I reinstall this caliper bracket, I'm going to clean up these slide pins a little bit by removing them and re-greasing them. To do that, I'm going to gently remove the boot and pull it back just slowly, and then slide the slide pins out slowly as well, because I don't want to damage the boot. The boot's in very good condition and I don't have an extra one on hand. If I had an extra one on hand, I'd probably just rip it off and who cares, but in this case I don't, you probably don't, so just gently remove it. To remove the old grease from the caliper brackets, I just use these extra long Q-tips. I probably go through 15 of them for each hole. And then I go ahead and just spray them down with brake cleaner. Now, before we install new grease, make sure these calipers are completely dry. We're going to clean these slide pins up and then hit them with a little brake cleaner as well. Now, the last part of our cleaning before we put everything back together is to clean our pistons. For this, I spray a little bit of brake cleaner on a paper towel, shop rag specifically, and I just kind of wipe them down as best as I can. Now it's time for the reassemble process. We're gonna put our boots back. By the way, this caliper is nice and dry. It didn't take too long. Brake cleaner dries up pretty quickly. Next, we're gonna grease our slide pins. I'm using this particular type of silicone grease for these slide pins. You don't need too much grease, just a decent amount, and it should be fine. One bead of silicone is perfect in my opinion. I avoid the tip, rub it around, slide it right in, and it should be fine. Any excess silicone, you can just wipe it right off with a shop rag. And make sure the boot does overlap the lip of the bolt. And again, the excess silicone, just wipe it away if you got any on there. I kind of made a little mess sliding it in, but you probably can do a better job at that than me. Next up, we're going to install our brand new rotors. For these particular rotors, I used Ray Bestos rotors. When you take them out the box, normally with normal rotors, you use your brake cleaner to kind of spray them off, spray that excess grease off once you get them out. In this case, these are coated rotors, so you don't need to do that. They already have like a rust protection coating on them, so they're not going to be all greasy when you take them out the box. They're actually just ready to install right out of the box. If you had already sprayed some on there for some reason, not a big deal, don't worry. Or if for some reason they are dirty or they have some type of grease on them that you got on them, you can use brake cleaner on them, but for the most part, it's not needed. Now, I put the rotor on. I use one lug nut. I position it at the bottom to hold the rotor in place. Now it's time to reinstall the caliper bracket. I'm going to put a little bit of this thread lock, specifically the removable type, on both of the bolts, and I'm going to torque it down to the manufacturer's specification on this particular vehicle, a 2021 Infiniti QX80. It is 122 foot-pounds of torque. Next step is to install the new brake pad hardware. With this step, the important thing to watch out for is that you do not scratch up the new rotor. Now with this next step, I apply a little bit of brake grease to the back of the brake pad. This right here is probably actually a little bit more than I need, but that's okay because we're going to spread it around. We're going to apply some to the back of the pad and to the side of the back of the pad. Not to the side of the pad, but to the side of the back of the pad. And then we're also going to apply a little bit to the brake pad mounting hardware. Now what's most important is that you do not get any of this brake grease on the front of the pad or on the brake rotor. I repeat, do not get any grease on the front of the pad or the brake rotor, because that can cause some malfunctions. So especially if you got a lot of it on there. So just be careful with that. And this is pretty much just to like prevent squeaks or whatnot. Now that that's done, you either want to wipe all of the grease off your hands or get a fresh pair of gloves, because you don't want to get any of the brake grease on the rotor or the front of the pads. And then we're going to go ahead and install the pads on each side the correct way. Make sure they're facing the correct way. That's a very important step. Next up, we're going to put these two spring pieces in. And by the way, if you just so happen to get any brake grease on the pads or the rotor, specifically the front of the pads or any part of the rotor, just wipe it off with some brake cleaner. Not that big of a deal. Now it's time to prep the caliper to put it back over the brake pads. Now, I am using a brake caliper compression tool, and these are dual piston calipers right here. So with this particular tool, it only allows you to push in one piston at a time. It's actually recommended that you push both of them in at the same time. And depending on what type of calipers you have, and some, if you push only one in, the other one will push out. With these particular calipers that I'm working with, that's not the case. I can push one in at a time and I'll be fine. But if you have that situation where you try pushing one in and the other one pops out, there's a couple different hacks you can use. One, you can use the old brake pad, use a block of wood, and you can kind of line this tool up right in the middle and push them both in evenly. You won't have that issue. Also, when you are compressing the pistons back into place, make sure you do it at a very slow pace and just, keep an eye on what's going on. I currently have this right piston pushed in. It looks like it's uneven if you look at it, but it's actually not. That's just the boot, not an issue. If I just tap that with a finger, that rubber boot goes right in. Just, if you're looking at that like, what? Why is that thing still sticking out? That's not what's going on here. And also, they do make a tool, I'll show it to you right here, that can push both of them in at one time if you want to get that tool. But if you don't want to do that, there are a couple of hacks. And again, here are some tools you can use. So we have both pistons pushed in. Now let's go ahead and install these over our new pads. We are going to start with a little bit of Loctite on our bolt because that's how it came from the factory. Just a reminder, please don't use the red Loctite. Use the blue. Please don't use the red. That stuff makes a brake job so much more hard, especially if you don't have the proper power tools to get it off. So please use blue, and that's if it was on there from the factory. You could also use it as just like a backup as well, but in this case, it came like this from the factory. So I'm gonna add a little bit on there. Now that the caliper is on, we're gonna go ahead and tighten these bolts up to the correct factory spec. In this case, for this 2021 Infiniti QX80, it is 53 foot-pounds of torque. And with these particular bolts, be careful because you do not want to over tighten them. You can strip them, you absolutely can. So try to get it, these nice and snug, but you do not want to over tighten them. Once you're done tightening that last bolt up, the next thing to do is to put the cap back on the brake fluid reservoir, put your tire back on, torque your lug nuts to factory specifications, lower the car, and that's pretty much it. And then go to the right side and apply this process to the right side as well. You always want to do left and right. So if you do brakes, if you're doing the front, do the front brakes. Doing the back brakes, do the back brakes left and right as well. Don't just do one side. You don't want to do that. And before you drive the car, before you even think about moving, pump the brakes. Pump the brakes until they are back hard again. When you initially pump the brakes, the pedal's going to go all the way down to the floor. But after a few pumps, it should feel back hard again. At that point, you can drive. Now, this picture you see right here, this is the brake job that I just shot in the video, but this is 2 weeks after we installed the new hardware. So I just took the tire off, just got a good look at everything again, just for the sake of this video to show you how everything looks. Everything's driving fantastic. Everything's perfect, but this is how the, rotors, pads, this is how they look right now. This is how they looked before. And again, this is them 2 weeks later, approximately 200 miles. So yeah, everything went well. Yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed this video. If you know anybody that could use this advice, please share. Comments down below. For some of the products that I actually use in this video, like tools and whatnot, I'll put a link down below to my Amazon store. So yeah, I really appreciate everyone that's watching this video. Please comment, like, share, subscribe. Questions, put them all down below. And you guys take care. I'll see you in the next video.